Welcome to What Do You Want to Do, the show that will hopefully help you figure out what you want to do in life or reconnect you to what you love doing. Each show has a guest who is doing what they want to do, whether it's in their career or in addition to their regular job. Most importantly, we want to help you realize that no matter your age, you too can do what you want to do if you have the will to do it. Now here's your host, Leonard Kaplan.
As far as materials, it also, like, we're very community oriented, the boot and shoemaking community. So we share a lot of, you can find this type of leather here, or you can find this type of glue here, and here's another supplier. And the more kind of this maker movement has happened, the more accessible materials have become, which is great for all of us.
It's funny because my father was a chemist, and he did business with the shoe industry, and in Brockton and in Lynn at the time when they were a shoe capital before the Great Lynn Fire. And he had the adhesives. He made the adhesives for a lot of different kinds of shoes. So we had those lying around the house. A lot of the stuff that you just showed, the models of the shoes, the feet, and all that stuff, we had them lying around the house. Interesting.
Yeah, it was really prolific here. I mean, I found it shocking the more I dug into it, how much we don't know about that footwear base here in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Like, there's kind of an echo of it, but it was so strong and so important, and it really almost completely disappeared.
Well,
I do these little demos and things on shoemaking, usually in a town that has a 10-footer, these little shops with a historical society or something. But it's really to tell people that, to educate, this is what happened here, and this was really important. And then it evolved and graduated in different ways. And the best part of doing that is getting the people coming and telling me stories like you just did. Somebody saying my dad worked at the shoe for 50 years, or, my mom worked in a ballet shoe factory, or some of the old people come and just say I did this. I did heels at a factory in Lynn for 30 years of my life. And it's great. One guy came in Lynn who was elderly, pretty old. And he said, my grandfather used to have a 10-footer, and I've got all these really awesome newspaper articles from 1899 in the Lynn item. Let me show you one because they're so good. Wow. So they, here's the router shop, and then it would tell you where it was and who worked there. And there's 20 or 30 of these things. So this guy came and he's telling me about it. And he tells me his grandfather's last name. And one of these was his grandfather's shop.
No.
And, it had the little story. His last name was Gray, and it was called the Gray Shop. And he started to cry while we were standing there. And it was just so amazing to make a real human connection with what happened all around us. This history was important, not only just as a good story, but to me, it's important in understanding how someone carries on a craft today in a tradition. And like I say, I have a living tradition, and how the knowing that history supports what we do now. I personally don't want to become a reenactor or just be doing techniques in order to show how things were done in colonial times. I want to be able to be an active contemporary craftsperson and artist, using the history that was here, that existed, and the knowledge people had around here, in order to be the best one that I can be, and to pass that on to other people too. So it's exciting, I think.
I'm right along with you there, because I think that, like you say, it makes you a better bootmaker, knowing the history of it. You're not just mechanically putting things together that you learn randomly. You're part of that tradition. You're carrying on that tradition. And
we're keepers of it.
You are, because in this day and age, handmade things are being lost. The art is being lost in many places. In Massachusetts, where we are, there was Lynn, there was Brockton. Was there in Lowell a shoe community too, I believe?
Lowell, I think, was more textiles, but Haverhill was a huge shoe community that was more specialized in women's shoes. Stoneham was all shoemaking in Stoneham. Haverhill, Stoneham, Lynn, Brockton were the real big ones.
Okay.
Quincy had shoes Lawrence and I think there were shoemakers everywhere, Lynn, but Lawrence and Lowell really were textile hubs.
Okay. Wow, you really know it all. That's awesome.
I don't, but I gather information.
Well, that's the best way to learn, rather than just from a book. You go to the primary sources and you're learning all about this tradition, and you definitely.
It worked really well for a while because it was too cold in my shop for at least, when you get that cold snap, that's like 3 weeks of sub-zero, and it was just too cold. And it's not that I couldn't heat the space, but when the metal tools were too cold to hold, I wouldn't do my best work. So I would stop working in here and just go to like the Lynn Library or go to the Phillips Library and just look up, start randomly looking up shoemaker, bootmaking, leather, thick keywords like that, and then come across these articles and old stories and the kind of stuff that doesn't circulate. It was so cool. And one of the Lynn Museum things was a shoemaker in Lynn from like 1700s. And it was his account book, which is kind of boring, but I was like, whatever, like I'm here, I'll check it out. And they literally brought out a book from like 1775 and just like chucked it on the table. and so I had like the eraser of a pencil turning the pages, because your fingers shouldn't touch something that old. And he was a shoemaker from Lynn, and mostly it was just like keeping track of his orders and his supplies and stuff. But then he had these little personal entries just randomly in the book. And it said like, his wife had smallpox and they survived and this and that. And then like one entry said basically that he was at the Battle of Concord. It was like, came home at midnight, one person was shot, and it was like dated April 19th, 1775. And it was just so cool. And this was, a guy, like someone like you or me that just lived here.
Yeah. Wow.
We think of it as being so removed and
it's living history.
Lofty. Yeah.
Living history. Amazing.
So I pulled out some of my art pieces to show you too, because they're always fun.
Let's see it.
Oh,
I always liked your art, even in high school. You seem to have developed like spontaneously. You were an expert to me as an artist.
Thanks, Lynn.
In high school.
Not quite, but so these are pieces. These are boots. I made them as if they were classic wearable boots, but they're not wearable because they're covered with 2,200 X-Acto blades.
Wow.
And this was, a long time in the making. I worked on these slowly over time, but I embroidered each blade because, an X-Acto blade has the little hole in the top of it. I embroidered them as if they were sequins. And then the inside that has like a fish spine type thing. And
your whole family wear, do you make shoes for your whole family?
No, I made a pair for my husband and he does wear them and loves them. But my kids, A, are growing too fast, and B, think this is dumb and boring and want nothing to do with what I do. So.
What a shame.
So this is the other one. I hope they grow out of it, but they haven't yet. They're teenagers. Everything your mom does when you're a teenager is lame. And this piece, this was a little bit more, not quite as like one-on-one to bootmaking, but boy, the light's really bad. Like the techniques in sewing this sole piece are kind of high-end shoe and bootmaking techniques. Okay. And then I made, the whole piece as kind of a sculpture. These are going to be in a show in Maine, start next week. I have to go drop them off soon, but it's 2 pieces that go together like that. And so they're all, this is all kind of the same techniques I use for bootmaking and skills. And those are them. And then this is a pair of boots I'm working on right now, which has some pretty cool details. And so I wanted to show these to you, Len, because these are my beetle boots. They're literally based off a beetle I saw at the Museum of Natural History. So this is like all the pattern making of the beetle's body. And that's from the beetle's head.
That kind of a beetle.
So it's that kind of a beetle.
Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. What do you want to do? This is always my last question. Somebody's out there, they want to get into this. What should they do? How do they start?
Find somebody who does it and apprentice with them. I realize in retrospect that the path I took just kind of betrayed our urban New England mentality of school. Like school is the way that you find something. So I was always looking for schools, but a lot of these traditional crafts are passed down from person to person. And it's not necessarily in a school setting. It could be, but more often than not, it's not. So if you truly want to be a maker, a shoemaker or a bootmaker, you need to move somewhere or find somebody where you can have access to that craft and either get a job for them or apprentice with them or hang around them and learn these skills. And that's how you learn the skills, and know that it will be a long journey. It takes years and years and years to get good at these things, even after you've learned them. And you don't make a lot of money doing it. So you just should be doing it for the joy of doing it, not expecting that at the end there will be some financial reward. Most boot and shoemakers have other jobs as well, but it's a passion. So if you share that passion, there's nothing stopping you from doing it, but you should know those realities, I suppose.
Great advice, Sarah Guerin, Bootmaker. Thank you very much. So Sarah, tell us the name of your business and how people can get in touch with you.
So the name of my business is Sabotuse. It's the female version of saboteur in English, but it's in French. And this is it. Sabotuse Bootmaker. And I'm on Instagram. That's my most engaging way of getting me. But I do have a website that is being redone. So I'm super excited about that. Next spring, I'll have a much better website than the one that I've thrown together. But I do have a website, sabotuse.com. And you can find me on Instagram at Sabotuse Bespoke or on Facebook at Sabotuse. And all my contact information is on there, whether it's messaging or email or phone. And I'm in Wakefield, Massachusetts.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on this show, Sarah. And to all of you out there, what do you want to do?